Hi, this is Jim from the Art of Growth podcast, and I'm popping over to YouTube because this week's episode has a very strong visual component since we are working with this. There it is, this feelings wheel. You can still listen to this on podcast, of course, but there's visual components going to help if you're able to watch it, but you can also download it for yourself. So at theartofgrowth.org right now, you can go and download the PDF for this for free. You can even order a print version of it for Canvas or framed or whatever if you want, because it's a super helpful tool for navigating growing in emotions. And so I'm glad to have this episode with this panel of therapists and a counselor who can help us understand this emotional world better and also how to navigate this tool. So wanted to have it on YouTube. So feel free to subscribe. That would be awesome because I'm sure we'll have other stuff that is coming up that is going to have this visual component, because as we learn the Enneagram, we want to approach it and help people learn from as many angles as possible. So let's get into this week's episode with our panelists. But you can download this at theartofgrowth.org. If you don't know your Enneagram type yet, you can take free tests there as well, or schedule typing interviews, coaching sessions, that kind of thing there. All right, let's go.
Awesome. Well, I am hugely honored to have the 5 of you here today. So we have a 6-person episode, and I have 5 therapists with me who understand this world way better than I do. So just as we're getting started, I wanted to know if I wanted each of you just to introduce yourselves and just say a little bit about what kind of therapy you're involved with. And we'll start right here at the top of my screen with Michelle.
Okay. So I'm Michelle. I'm a therapist in Birmingham, Alabama, an LPC, licensed professional counselor. I specialize in attachment and trauma. I do a lot of work with couples and also families who have children who've been through trauma. So that's me.
And and also say your type here, because Michelle is a type 3.
Yes, I'm a self-pres 3. That's me.
Yes. We have all the centers represented here, so I'm really excited about that. All right, Lisa.
Hello, my name is Lisa, and I am a clinical mental health therapist currently working in a public school, K-12 public school. I get to work with the students, sometimes the parents. I'm a self-pres type 1.
Yes, Maria.
Hi. My name is Maria. I'm a therapist in the Milwaukee area, and I do a little bit of couples work and find the Enneagram very useful in couples work. I work primarily with adults, a little bit with adolescents. I have a background working with a lot of kind of severe trauma-related stuff, personality disorders. I have special interest in postpartum stuff, chronic pain, that sort of thing. And so my background is cognitive behavioral, but I've really pulled the Enneagram in recent years for a fair number of my clients.
And Maria is a type 4.
I am a type 4. I'm going with social, but I've got an edge of self-pres.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Chelsea.
Hey, I'm Chelsea. I'm a marriage and family therapist located in Fort Collins, Colorado. I primarily work with kids, teenagers, and adults with complex trauma, similar, it sounds like, to a few of you here. I also work with students who are training to be therapists, marriage and family therapists. So I use a lot of Enneagram work with my work with my students and with my clients. I'm a 6 self-pres, but also very high social.
We got a lot of self-pres going on in this room. That's kind of a surprise to me. That's cool. And finally, Patria.
Hi, I'm Patria Rector, and I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. And my professional training is actually not as a therapist. I'm not a licensed mental health provider. I've been meeting in some variety of one-on-one capacity with people since about 2009, so I have a lot of experience with it. But it's more been the more spiritual, intuitive route. And recently went ahead and made it a profession and got my coaching certificate a couple of years ago. So this business has now grown into, there's about 8 of us here that are doing this type of work. So we have some combination of spiritual direction, counseling, or licensed therapy here. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of collaborators. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, unless you are watching this on YouTube, or you have already pulled up this image, which you can do either from our website. If you got our email today, you will have a link to see the feelings wheel that we're going to be discussing. It's also on Instagram, but I'm going to share it on the screen just for us in the room and for anyone watching this on YouTube. We haven't used the YouTube channel yet, but we're like, this might be a good use of it. And so the feelings wheel is, it's up on the screen here. And I would love to get just some of your reactions, your thoughts when you saw this, because, if you have other experiences with feelings wheels, helping people identify emotions. So for me, I got one of these and I printed it out on our refrigerator at home initially to help my daughter, so we could name the emotions as she's, was maturing, 6, 7, 8, that age group. But I found it, really helpful for myself. But then I reorganized it in this fashion to be a little bit more based on what we've learned in the Enneagram, really focusing on the high side, moving towards our high side, and really moving towards integration. We all have all 3 centers within us. We all experience all of these different emotions. And so I just wanted to organize it in a way that made sense with our work, with the work of the Enneagram. But I also wanted to honor just so much of the work of the world of counseling and of therapy who really help people unearth their emotions. And so I'm curious, really. I wanted to ask you all what you saw when you saw this, because a couple of you were meeting with me when I think I showed you like the sketch that I initially did in my notebook. A couple of you saw that and asked me to go make the thing, and literally the next day, then I reached out to a designer and said, Serena, our designer, and said, can you help us put this together? So I'm just curious as to your thoughts, and in that, even helping people who don't come from this world understand why do these feelings wheels exist and what purpose do they serve. So whoever wants to can kick it off and just start giving us some thoughts.
So I read a statistic recently that said in the United States, the average emotional vocabulary is 4 words. So the average American can, and that's some version of glad, mad, sad, and throw in a 4th. And so where these feeling wheels I think are so cool is that we really want to be able to connect with other people, to have them kind of be able to step into our space or step into theirs. We need more than just those 4. And so these feeling wheels really help us to drill down. Are you mad or are you frustrated? For example. And so it just, I don't know, really helps people expand. So what you talked about doing with your daughter is really neat, because I think if kids can learn that early and expand that vocabulary, they're just so much more comfortable as they grow up. When people are learning that as adults, it's a little bit tough sometimes. So I guess just some thoughts on why the feeling wheels are such a good thing, and yours in particular, because it is divided into the different centers: the head, the heart, the body. I'm really excited about that aspect, but I'll talk about that in a minute. I know other people have stuff too.
I think the specificity is so important, like you were saying, that it might not be just mad, or it might not be just happy. It's something more specific. And there's something that clicks, I think, for me, when we have an emotion that fits a little bit better than some of those main four. It feels very validating. It feels like, oh yes, that's the one. And that helps kind of start that journey of emotional regulation, where I'm able to, like Dan Siegel talks about, name it to tame it. That's a big thing we talk about with our kids and families we work with. And how do we actually name it as the first step to going into the process, really starting to regulate and letting emotions really go through us, so that we can kind of process through and then integrate, come out on the other side. But the very first step of that's naming it. And I like the wheel because it gives so many examples, and the nuance is there too, where you can really find the right emotion that fits whatever the sensation, whatever the experience is, and able to really start that process. And I think connect to other people in that way too.
Yeah.
Well, I think, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to kind of tag on to what Chelsea said, to add to it. When you can nuance an emotion from, I'm just angry, and then nuance it toward, well, I'm angry because I feel betrayed, versus, well, I'm angry because I feel frustrated. Once you know that nuanced sensation, it then it empowers a person to ask for those, that a need to be met, which is where that connection comes in, and the relationship is brought into that individual feeling. So it's got so many layers to it, and it's a simple tool to connect those points.
You know, emotional, being able to accurately identify your emotions is really critical. But, I think one of the things that happens with people is, I sometimes use the metaphor, is that when we aren't able to be really clear with ourselves, much less anyone else, about what it is we're feeling, it's kind of like going into an emergency room and saying, help me, help me, help me. And they say, well, what do you need help with? I mean, are you having a heart attack? Are you having a baby? Did you break your ankle? Your appendix out? What is it? And until I know what that is, in pretty accurately, I have no idea what to do about it. I can't possibly problem solve. I can't possibly accurately express what I need to a partner, or even cope in any kind of way. So I think that's a really important part of it. It's just that accurate identification of what we're feeling. But the other thing that I saw when I looked at it, because, honestly, and maybe this is just the group that I work with, the people that tend to gravitate toward my practice, accurate identification of feelings is often not the thing they struggle with the most. I mean, we all have our preferences, the emotions we like and the emotions we choose not to engage in when we have our options. But what I tended to see was a lot of movement toward, the thing that I often try to get through to people is, I think we have this bias toward, okay, you've got this problem and you just need to be different than you are. You need to somehow morph into this other person who has all these qualities that you don't have, and then you'll be better. And what I say to that is, I don't think that's true. I think we already have everything we already need. I'm already everything I need to be, but the best of me is the worst of me. And I need to learn how to channel that. I need to know what the movement is for me to be the best version of that person. And so when I looked at that wheel, what I saw was a lot of movement toward how I need to be in the world, right? So, if my place where I get stuck is in sadness and shame as a 4, and it is, the place I need to get to is toward that understanding of love, my own worthiness and lovability, that feeling that I am enough in and of myself. If I were a 6, having that sense of, faith in myself, that I have what I need within me without having to check somewhere else, for example. So I think that's how I was looking at it when I first looked at it. It was more about movement and how we need to channel just for ourselves that higher side of our numbers.
And Maria, I'd love to, absolutely, I agree with you. I think for me personally, as a 3, as a heart type, I liked that it allowed me, if I am really in the throes of some emotion, sticking just in my heart type is not always terribly helpful. And so looking at your wheel, Jim, I think I was able to say, okay, so if I am really jealous, if I stay in my heart, I'm going to have a hard time having that movement that you're talking about, Maria. But if I can look at another section of the wheel, that is so much more accessible to me. So I may jump over to the head type and look at what do I need there? Do I need to focus on, a wonderful fix, I guess, for feeling jealous or insecure is to be kind or encouraging to someone else. And I can find that in a different section of the wheel. So it isn't all, if somebody just tells me to be the opposite in that moment, I would be the opposite if I could, if that were accessible to me. And so I don't know, that really excites me about this wheel, that I can move. I think the heart type, that's the love section. So if I want to go into the peace or faith section, I was just able to really zoom in really quickly on what can I access in myself that will get me moving toward that high side. Because sitting in something like jealousy is not going to bring out the best in me, for sure. Yeah.
And I think that speaks to the integration piece that fits so well with this wheel. I think as a head type, and as a 6, I know a lot of 6s say they don't have the anxiety piece, but I definitely do. And that piece can feel overwhelming at times. And so I, as a head type, very much go into the spin and start thinking my emotions. What are the stories I'm telling myself about this emotion? How am I trying to think myself out of the spin? But that just makes the spin go faster. So how do I really get back into my body space, get into my heart space, really feel and name, okay, this is the anxiety. This is where it comes up in my body. This is how I know this is it. And then how do I move towards that high side where I can have courage and faith in self and faith in the future without constantly going into that head spin, and really kind of start like really being present and cultivating my capacity for presence. And being able to do that then gets me, I think, more into an integrated side where I'm really more my authentic self. I'm feeling more calm. I'm feeling more hopefulness. I'm feeling more able to be connected with my people who I love so much and my systems who support me so much when I'm in this more calm, present state. But sometimes I get so trapped in that spin of thinking my emotions. And I know I'm not going to be able to think my way out of this. I'm going to have to feel it. And I'm going to have to then be able to move through it in some way and kind of come back on the other side of that.
I am thinking, I would like to, Jim, would you repeat your question? Because I have so many thoughts running in my mind as everybody's talking that I kind of want to recenter since I haven't answered at all yet with it. Want to go back to the.
Yeah. I don't actually remember my original question.
Shoot, shucks.
So it's just like, what is coming up for
Okay.
you? What are you noticing based on the conversation
go
so
with
far?
that.
And if everyone, reminder, if you can keep your mic off of mute, because it'll make it later easier for editing later. So yeah, sorry, go ahead. Well, what's coming up for you based on what you're hearing? Where do you want to go next?
Well, I want to share a couple things because when I first saw that in that group that we were in, and you popped that up, I mean, like my response was like, oh, like, it's a lot to do with initially the colors and the beauty of it. Because as a 4, that's the draw. I mean, that's so much of the initial, like, oh my gosh. And so I just want to say too that it's beautiful. It's beautiful for one thing. But when I first came into emotions, and one of the reasons it took me 3.5 years to land as a 4 is that my first introduction to emotions was an 8.5 by 11 paper with, you know how they have like the categories on the top, like angry, happy, whatever. And then there was like probably 300 words, like little tiny 10 font or 8 font words, like down singles, like this. And I was nauseated. I was like, oh, excuse my language, but holy shit. Like I can't even feel one thing, and am I supposed to feel all these? So it took me a long time to understand from an Enneagram perspective that I'm a 4. Obviously I'm a self-pres 4 because I don't think the other 4s would probably identify too much with that. I don't know. So that was the beginning of coming into feelings, and it was overwhelming. There was no sense of help in that list. But I, at the same time, could see there was value in this. And somebody mentioned the illiteracy, the emotional illiteracy of the population. And I think average literate emotional language is that you can name 30 emotions. And I think most of us name 3 or 4. So that was the beginning of it. Then I found the faces feelings wheel chart, and I used that with my kids, especially when they were younger, because that helped us to communicate with each other. And then I found the feelings wheel, and I felt like the feelings wheels were far more helpful in terms of that, like you guys are talking about the movement and the sense of like emotions aren't static, they're always in flux, and so it helps to kind of to put that reality to it, I think. But with this one, what I really like about it is the movement, but it also before I do something with it, before I attend to the feeling of bitterness, I can identify, am I in bitterness, or am I in shame? Like, this is what I like about this one, is that I feel like in an average unhealthy space, yeah, can you put it up? I feel like we live in this in the sadness, shame, anger, fear, anxiety space. I feel like that's our average unhealthy, unconscious, unintentional space. And just identifying that first gives me a clue about kind of where I'm at. So, so like, am I more sad or feeling more shame? And am I leaning more towards the love, or am I leaning more? I don't know. It just feels very movement oriented. And then the other thing that I would say that really stood out to me are the colors. And I actually looked up the meaning of these colors. I don't know if you intentionally did that or not. But yeah, the meaning of the colors are really significant to me. So
Yeah.
I'll quit talking and let somebody else have a turn, but those are my
well, the colors were chosen specifically because I was it was like derivative of the the 3 main colors that you can create all the other ones with, and we had done some other work in other worlds where we assigned those colors towards a center that felt more consistent with that center. But I appreciate you saying that it looks beautiful, because that's one thing I really wanted to do, because the feelings wheel, I printed out a hat on my refrigerator. I didn't really like looking at it. Like it was very like clinical and cold, and I wanted something that was like warm. And so we're talking to the designer, and she's like, we could do it in watercolors. And I was like, yes, watercolors. Let's do that. Make it beautiful. But I love what you said about how, yeah, sort of that the emotion that's going on, that the automatic motion, the one that's sort of like running in the background. And in the Enneagram, the body types, the core emotion is, they say, is anger. For heart types, it's the sadness and shame, and for the head types, it's that fear or anxiety. But I don't think that's the core emotion. I think that's the core interrupting emotion. That's what I see in myself. That's what I see in a lot of the clients that I deal with. Is there's a core that is good, that is beautiful, that is their truest self, but then you have these interrupting emotions, and then we can end up feeling outside of this. So that's why I organized the faith, peace, and love in the center, and then it's really the interrupting emotions push us out of ourselves.
Yes.
We're more disconnected to ourselves. So that was the movement I wanted to give that sense of like pushed out from self, and then using some of this language to actually move back towards the authentic and true self.
Yeah, I wanted to use the word unlock. It feels like it unlocks that. That feels like a thing.
I like that word.
There.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
I really love that, because I was trained in a model, my doctorate's in clinical psychology. And so we learn to treat your symptoms and your disorder. And so, all of these things are seen as a problem, and we need to get rid of them, and all of this kind of thing. And I think what I've actually learned in practice, or what I've come to believe at least, is that it is about embracing that true part of ourselves, that core of ourselves. And for me, it's kind of a two-part process. The first part is accepting that I am who I am and who I have always been, and that is who I will always be. That, and there's some data to back that up, that, we kind of are born a certain way, and there's a continuity in that through our lifespan. But then once I've fully accepted that about myself, that, what, I am a 4, and here is what that means. And here is the thing I do. And I can predict that when I'm doing well and when I'm not doing well, this is what it looks like. And then I have to get over that. And that's the second piece. And I think that's where choice can come in. That I don't have to do the thing that I always do because it's the easiest way for me to do it. And so, I guess as a 4, I don't need a wheel to tell me the different feelings.
Right.
Emotions are the water that I swim in. I've got so many thousands more words that I can throw in there, and I can talk about at length.
Right.
And if I allow myself, that is exactly what I will do. Not that necessarily helps me.
Right.
And so the thing that, once I have choice and I go, okay, I've acknowledged that part of my problem is that I am completely paralyzed right now because I'm all up in my 4-ness. Now maybe I can take that step back and say, okay, I'm going to briefly say the thing I need to say, and then I'm going to take a step back. I'm married to an 8, and so that has been a skill that I've had to really work on, because that does not work with an 8. I can't have my hours of processing time as much as I'd like it. So I've had to learn to say, okay, that's the thing that I do. Now I need to try to be otherwise, say it, get in, get out, and do what's effective. And sometimes that's not what is most attractive to me. Right. Sometimes it's something different.
But you are still honoring yourself, and you're honoring your partner. You're honoring, like, I need to express a certain way. I'm going to express something, but I'm also going to do it in a way that is accessible to you. So you're really honoring the both of you in that approach, though.
Yeah, but it first starts with me acknowledging this is who I am and this is what I do.
Yeah.
But on the one hand, I love that about myself. I would not change that about myself. And at the same time, I have to see the places where that's not serving me. And I need to figure out a technique for me to help me deal with that, which is going to be different than the technique of somebody else. You know, if you're elsewhere on the Enneagram, you need something different than what I do. But to me, that's a lot of what therapy is figuring out, okay, like, how do I cope with myself now that I know that this is the thing that I do, what do I need to do about that?
It strikes me as it's a map. It is a map for where I am, but it's also a map for where I am in relationship to another, like I think is what you're talking about. And I think it's so connected to my story, that one of the most effective ways I find using feelings in my work is to say, what are you feeling, is the first question. Have you felt this way before that you can identify? And it helps to then put those pieces together in a really practical way that can help me know why is this way of engaging so meaningful to me, and why am I so attached to it? And is it serving me, as you were saying, now? And is there a better way? And I think that's where it really comes to bear fruit, not only in relationship with other people, but with myself, you know, in that sense of getting stuck or unstuck.
That makes me think about the stances in the Enneagram. So certain numbers, and Jim, you would have to call those out because I'm not 100% clear. I know that my stance is typically to move kind of at people or against, like people with my stance have to watch being maybe aggressive or too much. But then there's also a stance of moving away, of withdrawing, and then the third stance of sort of moving toward maybe a little needier. And so I think being able to move out of those stances and really be able to move with others, which is what you guys have described so well. Going back to this wheel, we have to be willing to, or we have to be able to conceptualize, how are we going to move with them? What do I have that I can use to move with you? What can I connect to in you so that that's a safer place, a more effective place for both of us? I'm fascinated with the stances idea. And I really saw that when I looked at how this was broken down, just as giving so many other possibilities besides those ways that we interpret people that can make things really difficult.
Yeah. And that there are those stances do exist within each center. All three stances exist within all three center. So, and that, you know, we always say that you have all these centers within you, like you have all these emotions in you, like you tend to have a preference, of course. And I look at this chart and I certainly have my preferences, but we've been talking more and more about this, like the fourth way, which is like the integration of all of them. It's the integration of all three centers. And it's the essence of having all these things at the core of us, that, you know, the body types who are, I am what I do, what we do matters. It matters a great deal that if we are doing from a place of peace, as far as doing from a place of anger, where we have to fix something and change something, or we have to, you know, pull away, in the case, more in the case of the 9, you know, that for the, you know, for the heart types, I've had this conversation with heart types where they're just like, they feel like the sadness and shame, that's like the most authentic, that's the most real emotion. And I'm like, that's not the realist you. Go deeper, go deeper or zoom out. Who you are and who you give is love. We talk about like the anxiety and the fear, even if it's not noticed by the head types, that functioning attention towards what I need to do to not feel that. But I'm still like, that is not your core thing. And that's why when we did opposites with all these, like the opposite of fear is not courage. It's an aspect of it, but the opposite of fear is faith, the capacity to move forward when you do not know the outcome. That's what faith really is. It's the capacity to move forward even if you don't know the outcome. And so it's like moving towards your core and your true self. I loved how you were talking about the movement, because that is the goal. I want us to get towards the movement of like these integration. These are all part of us. This is your true self, is the high side of you, is the truest side of you. It's like you think that this is the real you, you go down deeper, you're going to find, because this is what happens. A lot of times people, they go through a little bit of tragedy. If they're, let's say they're a body type, they go through some tragedy and some betrayal, and they start going down, and they get angry. You can see bitterness showing up. But for so many of them, if they actually go all the way through it, what they end up on the other side is they are someone who can open up, who understands how hard life can be. They become more empathetic, more engaged with their emotions, and they become more of a presence and a perpetuator of peace as a result. And so that's what you're giving back to me. It's so amazing to hear you're giving back to me some of what I'm hoping like this tool will do for people. So I'm curious as to you've brought up a couple things as far as what you found useful to you, and I'd be curious like what else is either useful to you, or how could you see yourself using this tool with others?
One of the things that I love the most about the Enneagram is that it doesn't just label a personality like some of the other assessments do. Like, this is just who you are. You fit in this box. One of the things I love is that it's more geared toward a path of growth. It's helping you identify patterns and a path toward integration. So this wheel has, I see so many uses, because it's the first step is, yes, kind of identify what you are feeling, label it. I mean, just that function of naming it to tame it has so many physiological effects. But another layer is, as I'm a 1, so body type, I go from body to head pretty quickly, and I analyze. So I can name, especially with my background and training, I can name a lot of nuanced emotions. That doesn't always help me get into my heart. So being able to identify, okay, that loop, body to head, maybe my growth step, and maybe a way to use this with people you're coaching is, helping them identify their neglected center and having them imagine what some of those feelings feel like, to, for, again, using it for integration and the idea of that fourth way. I could see for me in that love heart section, meditating on what is the physical sensation of belonging feel like, allow the system to feel that deeply and just sit with it. So that then in a crisis moment, when I go from gut to head really quick, I can be like, oh, wait, hang on. Oh, I can imagine now what belonging feels like. It re-engages me with the heart. I can connect with the other person. So I think using it intentionally to help develop some of our neglected or repressed center sensations, actions. There's just so many possibilities.
Yeah. And Lisa, something you mentioned in the email was hemispheric integration. Can you explain a little bit of that? I saw a couple of heads go, "Oh yeah," and I'm going, "What?" So
Yeah, they will know exactly. Sounds like we have some Siegel fans here. So right hemisphere in general is holistic. It's feeling, it's sensation. Artistic. Left hemisphere tends to function in categories, and it's logical and linear and has language. So integrating those hemispheres, it's designed to, our brain and mind are designed to take in sensory information from the outside world and process it. A holistic impression on the right side goes to the left side for, okay, help me make sense of this. What's the logic here? Label it. Goes back to the right side. Okay, this is what I figured out. Okay, here's a more expanded, holistic approach. So when we can, it is that name it to tame it, when we can add language to this huge, overwhelming, broad feeling, global feeling, and you add nuanced language, it is literally altering the fabric of that integration between the left and right, and it just moves us toward more flexibility and an increased sense of well-being. It also integrates vertically, head to nervous system, because when you can label and name, all of a sudden it shifts that global to specific, and you can do something with specific. So your nervous system kind of relaxes, like, oh, it's not going to overpower me. I can develop strategies. So it just shifts the whole chemistry.
I think it helps you ride that wave, the actual feeling of the feeling that is so difficult for myself included. And how do you really ride and stick with the wave of the emotions? And one of the things Dr. Hillary McBride talks about is we heal when we can be with what we feel. And I really love that, because it's just such a reminder that even though we want to get to the other side, we want to move into this other area of emotion, we first have to name it and then be with it, turn towards it. What is it telling me? What is this emotion teaching me? Is it anger and it's teaching me that I need to put up a boundary here, or a value was triggered? Is it fear based on a past experience, or something that I'm nervous about happening in the future? And I think that for me is too, especially as a head type, I don't like that part, particularly with the emotions that are uncomfortable or not quite as easy to stick with. I'll maybe sit for a couple minutes with it and then be like, okay, why isn't it over? I sat with it. Why is it still here? Why am I not done feeling the emotion? So I think that speaks to that piece that you can't really, your body and brain and nervous system can't digest it and metabolize it until you really sit with it and turn towards it. And I think what we've been taught as a culture and society is to diminish it, to push it down, that's not a feeling that we express or that's allowed to be felt for XYZ reason. And so we do that. And then we have our defenses come up that try to protect us from actually feeling the feeling or naming that that's what it is. And then what typically happens, and Dr. McBride talks a lot about this in her book, The Wisdom of Your Body, but it'll start screaming at us. It'll start coming up in all these other ways. We start developing chronic pain and trauma responses and all these even more overwhelming emotions when we don't sit and turn towards it, the emotion. And I think too, it takes a lot of vulnerability to be able to do that piece. And I find for myself and for my clients that that feels really scary, to be vulnerable enough to name this is what it is. And really sit with it, that there's, again, a lot of our own experiences and socialization that is making it feel really, either not allowed, or this is too dangerous, or I've been punished for, or shamed for expressing this emotion. And so there's that protective part, I think, that really sometimes can be a barrier, even though it's trying to protect us, can be a barrier to really sitting with the emotions, letting us turn towards it and getting curious about, why is it here? What is this teaching me? Because that takes so much vulnerability. A lot of especially teenagers I talk with, talk about, if I let that wall down, people are going to judge me. They're not going to understand. They're going to call me crazy. I'm going to get put in the hospital. We pathologize a lot of it, and a lot of mental illness issues really come down to this inability to regulate emotion when, so much of it. And so I think being able to have the vulnerability and normalize these emotions are okay. We all have them. We all feel them. We need to turn towards and get used to being uncomfortable sitting with the emotion, no matter how hard it is, and then lean on others. Connect, whether it's with a therapist, a loved one, who can really validate that emotion and let you know that you're not alone in that. So I think that can be so rewarding when we can get to that side of things, but can be so hard because there's so much vulnerability with that.
There's an irony too. I think that I love that you have that core, the peace, love, faith in the middle, because there's a paradox that goes with the vulnerability of feeling positive things. I think it's really vulnerable when we go to that deep core and just dare to hope, dare to love, and really expose that. I think that's why those, I don't remember the exact terminology you used, Jim, but the distractible, the anger, the sadness, the shame.
Yeah, interrupting emotion. Yeah.
There you go. Interrupting emotion. Yeah. In a sense, I mean, that's the patterned response, right? To that core need that is ultimately so vulnerable. And I know as a one, I desperately want, goodness and peace in the world. And I get angry because I can't feel that, or it feels like it's too sad to want that and see everything else. So but just that reminder that that's the core, and as we develop regulation and flexibility, we can allow that to be exposed just a little bit more.
I think that's so spot on too. I remember in our Enneagram coaching group, I talked a lot about my anxiety, and Jim brought up the idea of faith. And when he gave me the definition, I was like, oh, that feels scary to lean into that. That feels like, I don't like the anxiety feeling, but the faith, like, that feels vulnerable. Yeah. Like, and then that anxiety, if I lean into faith of just doing the next thing, even not knowing what the future holds or knowing if that's the right decision, the anxiety is the interrupter going, well, what if? Well, what if this, or what if that? And then it's like, okay, I see you, I hear the anxiety, I get it. And I'm going to regulate and then still continue to choose faith. But I think that's so right, that core emotion can feel so vulnerable, especially when we're not used to leaning into it as much.
Just having a thought, maybe my fellow four can tell me if you feel this too, as you guys are identifying the movement in feels more vulnerable. It feels almost flipped for me. Like, it feels the more that I move toward love, I feel less maybe not vulnerable, but wounded is maybe a better word. The more that I move toward love, I feel less woundable. and more stable.
Mm.
So I'm curious about that as you guys are talking, because I identify partially, but I'm curious if it's a hard time thing, it's a 4 thing, or it's just a me thing. So yeah.
Well, my first thought about that is that I think 4s are a special case in that vulnerability is our superpower, right? I mean, that is who we are. So that really isn't our challenge. I think, speaking broadly outside of a 4, the thing I was going to say is that, we all have our favorite emotions. And just because something is painful doesn't mean it's not comfortable. We all have our go-to painful emotion, whether that's anger or fear or shame or what have you. I mean, we have the thing where we like to get stuck. And I think the goal of it isn't, it's to be able to feel everything. It is to have the rainbow.
Yeah.
So yes, I feel sadness, but I also have the capacity for joy, and I allow myself to feel fear, and I allow myself to feel all of it. And I think for me, is I think about, like, so what do we do with all of this? Because this idea of, okay, so who is this core self that I'm working toward? If I'm not about that emotion that I like to get stuck in, what am I, and what does that mean? I think it opens me up to the really beautiful part, not just of who I am, but of who you are. And I think then we can start to look at it as, what is the gift that we can give to each other? I don't have all of these gifts naturally. Vulnerability, I've got that, and I can lead other people into that place, and we're good to go. But there are other places that are not an easy fit for me. And so when I can see, without judging someone else and pathologizing their space, when I don't have to label that as somehow bad or wrong, or here's why you'll never be normal or healthy or loved or whatever,
Right.
which unfortunately a lot of Enneagram teaching does kind of sound like that. I hate to say it.
I agree.
But, especially my early introduction to it, a lot of it sounded like, oh, here's what you are, and here's what is wrong with you, and here's the personality disorder that goes with that.
Right.
Which I think is a horrible stance.
Yeah.
And instead, if I look at it as not like what's wrong with you, but I think, what is the gift that you have to give to me?
Yes.
Each of these other types has a gift that I don't have. And so whether it's me getting myself activated and saying, okay, I have to do right now, or I have to persist even though I'm feeling like I'm drowning here, or whatever that is, I can see that as a really beautiful thing. And so, if we're all about relationships, and I think we are, the second that I can see who I am and embrace the fullness and the beauty of that, the sooner I can see the fullness and the beauty in who you are, even when you're being really difficult right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Because I can see where that comes from, and I can go, oh, okay, that's just so-and-so getting caught in the place where they get caught. But here's what's helpful about that. And I can have compassion for that. And I think that's where we can start to grow.
Mm.
Chelsea, I thought you made such a good point about mental illness kind of coming back to the root of difficulty with regulation. And I know in the attachment world, there is a growing belief that there really is no such thing as self-regulation. It is all co-regulation. Even if we do it for ourselves, we do it because somebody co-regulated us at some point. And so if I have had, if I get a subpoena, which is my absolute least favorite part of my job ever, is to get a subpoena, as very anxiety producing. Instead of saying that I self-regulate, what do? I think about, what will my husband say to me when I get home and say, you're not going to believe this, but I'm going to have to go testify on somebody's behalf. He will say, I know you hate it, but you've got this, you're good at this. I'm not regulating myself. It's the part of him that I'm internalized that's helping me. And so I think what you're saying, Maria, is so important, that we cannot co-regulate somebody if we're not willing to step into their space, especially when that space isn't especially easy to sit with, when they're having some of those I don't know, less appealing reactions. That's where it happens, when we're able to be with a person in that. And in order to do it, we have to have a certain amount of understanding and trust that regardless of what it might bring up in me, that I have faith in you. I know what is at the core of you. And so I can sit here while you grieve or are angry or filled with shame. And so, I think just, and so again, coming back to the wheel, I think it's just such a beautiful opportunity to do that.
Mm.
And at the same time, to help us feel, I think the value, the primary value, despite all of our training, the main thing that therapists offer people is a space where we're not shutting down what you are. We're not pathologizing it. We're not, and looking at a wheel like this says, okay, so if this feeling that is my least favorite, or how I feel the most vulnerable, if it's on that wheel, it exists in the world. It's not just me. It's that same kind of acceptance. I don't know. I just think is a really neat thing, a really healing tool.
Well, I love what you said about the co-regulation, and Maria's saying about, we're in a relationship, but it's that, what I hear and what I'm even feel when I'm listening to you all, I can see that part of me. I'm not even sure that it's a gift I don't have, but the volume's turned way down. And then when I'm around hearing you, then I learn to turn the volume up on that particular emotion. The sensitivity meter can kind of come up a little bit, and I can learn to integrate that a little bit more into my life, which is part of that. I think that co-regulation is just kind of like, oh, you gave me permission to normalize that thing that I was afraid of. And I think I want this to normalize emotion for people, to be like, oh, it's not completely out of the question that I'm going to feel completely overwhelmed and armored and hostile. Like that's going to happen sometimes, or that I'm going to feel so purposeless and disconnected. Or I'm going to like pull back because I'm spinning and I'm going to feel like inferior and foolish. Like these things are going to go on in our lives at different points in time. And we can say like, oh, I'm disrupted right now, but I can be with it. As Chelsea was talking about, I can be with that emotion, and that will actually help me move through it, because then I'm not trying to be good. I'm not trying to be this sort of center thing. I come home to what I truly am. And something a couple of you guys said set something off in my brain when I was thinking about this center of the feelings wheel of peace, faith, and love. Sometimes I'm not even sure that those are feelings. It's like when those are integrated, it's almost like those are states.
Mm.
It's like a state of being. It's because it's part feeling, it's part decision, it's part allowing space for it. It's almost one step like beyond or outside of just a feeling. And as you were describing that, I was like, oh yeah, like that's something else. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it really does.
Definitely
It's
does.
Core, it's the fabric of that essential self.
Mm.
Yeah, and I was thinking too, about the co-regulation piece and with the states of being, like, I'm not sure I can put this to words exactly yet. I'm just thinking out loud. But Jim, when you're talking about how hearing us gives a sense of, oh, it's muted, but it's here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like an invitation, and a kind invitation. And for me, and in the heart triad, where I get stuck in the head heart loop, and the sense of doing is actually where I feel the most vulnerable. If I do something, then it's going to create an outcome. Then it's going to create something I'm responsible for. And so then I can just, stay in the doing. But then in that, when I'm with a body center or a head center, actually, it helps me, but it particularly body center, since that's my root breast, it helps me to go, oh, I can survive this fall. I can survive this outcome. I can survive this thing. And so I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but that's really standing out as something really powerful in working this wheel, I guess. Mm-hmm.
I come from a background where I've done a lot of mindfulness-based psychotherapies. And, what mindfulness really is it's, paying attention to something on purpose without judgment. And
good definition. Say it again.
Okay. Paying attention to something on purpose without judgment.
So good.
And the place where we get in trouble, the place where our suffering lives, is quite often in that judgment. It's what we don't want to sit with, what we say, no, this is too much. I can't do this. This is bad. This is wrong. It's wrong for me to feel that way, or that's a primitive emotion, or that's too vulnerable, or whatever it is. Or we love something so much that we want to cling to it, and we just want to, sit and marinate in it. But, if we can get to the place where we can just notice where we are without either clinging to it or pushing it away, what we find is that it kind of comes and goes. It moves like a wave. And I remember years ago, there was this book called Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy. And it was kind of a self-help cognitive behavior therapy book for depression. And I remember years ago being at a training, and I think it was with Robert Leahy, and forgive me if I was wrong, Robert Leahy, but I believe what he said was, if I were to name this book, I would have called it Feeling Everything. Because it really isn't about feeling good. I think what we want is to feel good. That's what's attractive to us. I just want to feel good. But really what we need is to have equal access to whatever comes and goes without trying something artificial to get rid of it, whether it's to stuff it or to repress it or to cling to it and marinate in it or whatever that thing is. I think that when we just kind of release and we sit with what is without judgment, all of a sudden we're free.
Wow.
Because you're unstoppable if you can be where you are and you don't have to escape, or then you have no limits, right? I mean, you're absolutely powerful if you don't have to fear whatever space you are led into.
Yeah, but people are so afraid of that. I think the thing that people say to me all the time is some version of, if I let myself go there, whatever that feeling is will be so big or so horrible or so terrible that I will drown, I will die, I will go crazy, it will never go away. And that actually isn't what happens. I mean, that's the thing, if you think about it, like, if I pull a muscle in my back and now I start walking weird because I'm trying to protect that space, I'm going to start having pain all over my body. But if I can just kind of sit with that core of that thing that got injured for a little bit, the pain is unavoidable, but I don't need all the crap that got attached to it. And I think that's what we do with our feelings, is that we start doing something weird because I'm having this feeling, and either I'm going to hold on really tight to this, or I'm going to force something else away in an unnatural way. And now we've got a whole bunch of things that we didn't bargain for, and that we now have to deal with.
Mm.
Well, and the thing about life is that it's full of suffering. Like if you're living life correctly, there inevitably will be moments or seasons of suffering.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, especially in the culture and society we live in, it's how do we numb that out? How do we avoid that? How do we push it down and just get through it so we can keep moving and keep doing the next thing without really, again, letting ourselves feel it, because it sucks. We don't want to feel suffering. Those are painful emotions. They're not typically ones that we're like, yes, I get to feel this sense of pain and suffering. And yet life is going to be full of that. There are going to be losses of people we love and hard times and stress. And so being able to do exactly that, Maria, what you're talking about being mindful and open to all of it, not labeling an emotion as good and bad, and knowing that it's temporary. It's not going to last forever. And the more that we can turn toward it and feel it, and even better, feel with somebody else, let somebody else in on that emotion, whether they're feeling the same or not. Being with and having that co-regulator is what's going to help us continue to move through it and come to the other side of it. But I think we're so taught that that's not good, that that's scary, that these are emotions that we can outrun or push down or numb out. But the hard thing, especially about numbing out, it's so enticing to do, and there's so many options these days to numb out. But when we numb out the painful emotions, we are inevitably going to numb out the good feeling ones as well. Yeah.
Can I just add?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna to piggyback on what you guys are saying there, that I think it's single-handedly, this has the power to include a whole segment of the world that we don't know how to include if all we can feel is everything's good. Because chronic pain, Alzheimer's, brain injury, I mean, genocide, all the things, like, can get bigger and bigger and bigger, where if all that our goal is to feel good or to feel pleasant, then we inevitably ostracize how much of the world, so I think this could normalize so much more than we even realize.
Yeah, I mean, that's a kind of a hope and a goal, is when you see that positive in the center, I feel like it's less intimidating to even go out to the edges. I'm hoping that there is an empowering aspect of that. Like I'm more willing to look at the most negative things that I feel or that I experience, because I see it as part of a whole, not the whole. It's I am having this feeling, not that I am, I feel sad, not I am sad. We're not using that that over identification kind of language. And to Chelsea's point, yeah, you're so right. It was experiencing a great deal of pain was an invitation to vulnerability that actually sensitized me to others and created a greater sense of connection, and opened more of the channels to love and connection in that way. And so you're exactly saying, some of those things and what I want to see come together. So this is hugely helpful, and I'm learning so much. I'm enjoying, so much this conversation. I'm just wondering if there's anything left burning that you're feeling like we really need to say this, or we need to cover this. This is something we really want people to know.
One thought that I had here, and it's just kind of going off of what we've been saying, which is, I think a piece that gets lost in here is the issue of narrative. You know, we each have a narrative that is type specific. And it's the story that we tell ourselves about who we are and what our lives are like and what that means. And so, you know, you and I can go through an identical painful experience, but if we have a different narrative, we're going to come out of it looking really different, you know?
Right.
And I think one of the things that we're not good at is actually really noticing and remembering accurately. You know, we tend to remember things that fit the narrative. So if I'm a 4 and my narrative is that I'm on the outside looking in, that I'm not really a part of this, that, you know, all of that 4 stuff, that's the story I'm going to tell you. That's what the narrative is. But if I were to really sit and be mindful of that feeling, whatever it is that I'm noticing in the moment, wherever I am, what I'll find is that it's not actually that story, that maybe there was some moment of that, but then there was a moment of joy that was interspersed, and then there was a moment of something else. And we're not exactly the stories that we tell ourselves.
Right.
And so I think being able to, you know, when you're able to sit with the feeling without trying to get rid of it, to try to, you know, fade it, fix it, morph it into something else, what we really see is that, you know what, my pain was not a lifetime of unending misery. Actually, that may have been there, but there are other things too. I'm not terrified every moment of my life. I have other feelings too, or not ashamed every moment. So I think it opens the door for a whole lot of other things and to move beyond the narrative.
I think when we're doing this emotions work, keeping in mind that idea of self-compassion and giving ourselves grace, just like with anything else with this, that this can be hard work, even for heart center types, but especially if you're not in the heart center. And I know one thing that has helped for myself, my clients, and I use a lot with my students is some of the self-compassion pieces and trying to hold myself and others in that compassion, regardless of the emotion that's coming up. And I know for me, it can be helpful to have a guided meditation that helps me tap into the feelings. I use Dr. Kristen Neff's website a lot. She's the researcher in self-compassion and has some wonderful website is selfcompassion.org, and has some really lovely short and longer guided meditation practices, and some that are like a self-compassion break, but also about how to feel your feelings. And I think those help me to really sit in it and do a little bit of body scan into what's coming up, and then continuing to try to have that mindfulness, non-judgment, hold myself in compassion and others in compassion with whatever we come in with, and holding the space. And I think that's the wonderful piece about therapy, is that we are often able to hold that space for clients coming in with whatever emotion, all the emotions coming in, and offering a bit of that co-regulation as well, especially for clients who have not gotten that. I work with a lot of kids and families and adults with trauma backgrounds that didn't have a foundational attachment, secure attachment that led to safe co-regulation. And then now are having really difficult time regulating themselves, regulating their own kids, co-regulating with a partner, co-regulating with their children. And so I think the practice of therapy, even just those doses of co-regulation we can offer, can rewire the brain and heal in this way that is movement, is process, is the art, I think, of therapy.
Yeah, that's really good. So before you all go, I'm going to throw up the image one more time, and just I would love tips from each of you. Like, let's say that they went to the Art of Growth website, they got this, and now it's hanging up. it's hanging up either on the fridge or at the house somewhere, what's one tip that you would give them from where you come from and what you know that you would recommend to them?
I think I would love for people to hear that. I know that so many of us avoid certain feelings because we are afraid we'll be unsafe or we'll be rejected. And I imagine every therapist here would agree when you sit with a person and they are authentic and they are truly in whatever is true or real for them, it is impossible not to care for that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so going there, if you have the courage and you have the appropriate person to do it with, actually yields the exact opposite of what people fear. You will be safe. You will be accepted. Getting from here to there is not always easy. But so, yeah, I would say when you look at that beautiful wheel with the watercolors and that there are not good and bad or acceptable or unacceptable. Look on that wheel, and if you can find where you are right now, the fact that it's on there means that's okay. That's okay. Other people are feeling that too.
Thank you.
I would say a couple things. One is if you look at this, if someone looks at this and just feels immediately overwhelmed or unsure, to maybe start with a color and just land on a color and see where that takes you. And then I would also just say that this is not an exhaustive list, surprisingly, of emotions, that it's just a doorway. And that if you can't find exactly what you're looking for, find something close, or again, just stick with the color.
I'd be curious about two things. One, where in your body do you feel that emotion? Is there a place, your throat, your stomach, your hands, your behind your eyes? Is there a place in your body where you can really feel the sensations of the emotion? What sensations go on with that? How do I know when I'm feeling sad? What is my body telling me that helps me clue in that this is sadness or this is anger or disappointment or something else? The other piece, looking at it from really exploring family of origin, I think can be helpful with this. What are the stories that I was told about this emotion when I was younger and in my family of origin, and maybe even my family now? Are we allowed to express certain emotions? Are we rewarded for expressing certain emotions and punished for others or shamed for others? Because I think for me, that's also helped to understand why I have such a hard time with certain emotions, or the stories society tells us, right? Whether it's about our gender or race or ethnicity or something else about what's allowed and what's not allowed to be expressed. I think really getting curious about some of that will help us understand maybe some barriers that can come up when trying to tap into certain emotions.
And you bring up a really important point there, Chelsea. I think sometimes I could walk up and I could be like, I don't know, where am I? But if you ask yourself some of the questions about like, where did I witness this? What were some of the ones I witnessed in my home growing up? And be able to kind of understand a little bit where you come from by actually having a little objective distance and kind of look at like which emotions showed up a lot in my family of origin as I was growing up. Yeah, that's really good. Thank you.
I think my starting thought might be speak a little bit to our the Western philosophy that has done us a great disservice, thinking that our heads and hearts are separate, that emotions are just, that woo-woo thing. Why do we need to go there? We don't, we're missing the fundamental understanding that it's a biological designed system to give us information of our outside world. So some of that, non-judgment, being a little bit, unattached or over-identifying with emotions, to see it as information. It's information that's coming in, and the body is kind of organizing it in a way to prioritize action. And so seeing it as information, yes, the idea really is, someone said earlier, it's the goal is to have the whole rainbow of expressions. The more information you have, the better decisions you can make. And so there fundamentally is no bad or wrong emotion. It's simply a biological response. Candace Pert, molecules of emotion. Ultimately, emotion is a protein peptide. It's a physical thing. It's a series of chemical reactions in response to stimuli. So I don't know. Dive in.
Love it.
Well, the first thing that I guess I'd like to say with this is that you'll notice there's no hierarchy of types.
Right.
There's not like, oh, these are the healthy ones and those are the unhealthy ones.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the people that I work with in a variety of places on the Enneagram believe that they're broken. They're coming in because there's something that's not working right. And what I would say is that you're not broken, that where you are on that wheel simply helps you know what your life's work is. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we're better at that than at other times. Sometimes everything is going pretty well and everything is in tune and I'm the best me that I can be. And other times it feels like everything is wrong and awful. And, we can label something or we can identify it as not helpful. We can identify it as not useful to us, or not healthy for us, but we are not broken. Mm-hmm. We're not defined by the least functional part of ourselves. Yeah. It just lets me know that, this is part of my work. And maybe I have to work on that really hard right now so that I can get out of a depression or work on an anxiety problem or what have you. Or maybe this is something I have to cultivate for the rest of my life. And I think quite often that's really what it often is. It's, this is the thing that one way or another, I am going to have to be focusing on as my work. And it's different than your work, but that's okay. That's not, neither one is good or bad. That's just the flavor we got.
It's really good. Well, I am just hugely honored that you all have taken this time to help. It's funny, I'm like, help me understand the thing I made, but just help other people understand the usage of this and why these are so helpful. I think it's an incredibly helpful parenting tool, which came up. I think it's a incredibly helpful integration tool to understand like that everything belongs. All of this is part of us, and that the core view is good. Like he was just saying, like you're not broken. Like we always say around here, there's nothing wrong with you, and you have a lot of work to do. It is both. These are both true. And so for the parenting, for the integration, for actually seeing and getting to know yourself better. We even say that to Abby and I say that whenever we meet with couples, is like, we have good news. You'll never understand each other. Because you don't even hardly understand yourself. Like, how are you going to really understand another person? But like getting to understand yourself and the person you're with better, and really understanding what is going on. I feel like Enneagram, at its best, it's the "you are here" spot on the map. That's the way I refer to it. It doesn't tell you your destination. It tells you this is where your starting point is. And to me, this is another map. It's like, well, find the "you are here" spot, but that is not deterministic about your identity or your direction. So thank you so much for taking this time to unpack this tool. I'm so excited that whenever this goes out in the next month or so, to people, and they can download it, they can put it on their wherever they want themselves, and hopefully use it as a tool for growth. So thank you so much for helping in them do that. And I just so appreciate your knowledge. I learned just so much from you tonight even, and I'm so thankful. So thank you for being with me. I really, really appreciate every single one of you. All right. And
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us,
Thank
Jim.
you so much.
then bye,
Yes, thank you as well.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.